BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello, Nedheads. Hello, Black Box Battalion. Today is Thursday, another Dahlia Thursday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? On Thursdays, I talk to you guys about the Black Dahlia murder, one of the most horrific crimes in American history. And in this episode, I will be looking at Jack Anderson Wilson as a suspect in the murder of Elizabeth Short. And you guys know the drill. You can hit the like button if you want, subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment down below if you have something to say about the Black Dahlia murder. For larger things, you can send them to me at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And I am your host, Box Ned. In addition to the Dahlia Thursday segment, I also cover other stories here on this channel, such as D.B. Cooper on Fridays, Jack the Ripper on Wednesdays. I've recently added a new segment about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, which will be on Tuesdays, and most famously, on Mondays, I talk about the Zodiac Killer. So I would like to let you know that this episode is partially sponsored by Michael Cole, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy. It's a deep dive into the mystery, and you can get it anywhere you get your true crime books. Now, I also have one small announcement, and that is, in addition to the regularly scheduled lineup, on Saturday this week, I will be doing a special bonus episode about the disappearance of Maura Murray from 2004, and it's going to be an interview. So if you're curious about that case as well, feel free to tune in this Saturday, and if you're listening to this in the future, please feel free to check out my episodes on the disappearance of Maura Murray. But to focus on the Black Dahlia case, firstly, there is an interview that was done with Betty Bersinger in 1996 that has been shared online, and this is available on Kyle Wood's channel, which is called Kyle J. Wood's Dark Castle. Betty Bersinger was the woman who was walking with her daughter on January 15th of 1947 and found the body of Elizabeth Short near Lamert Park in Southern California. She found the Black Dahlia, and this is a video that does have full-body crime scene photos, and they are blurred out a little bit, but not so much where you can't see all of the details, only a little bit of distortion, and I was really quite surprised that these were all right on YouTube. But the interview was only about 4 minutes long, but she is just telling the story of what happened when she found the body of Elizabeth Short. Absolutely horrific. But I also want to let you know that I've started the book Black Dahlia Red Rose by Pew Eatwell, and this is a book that a lot of people have been asking about. A lot of people have been talking about it for years, and I confess, my interest in the Black Dahlia case really goes back to 2022. I, of course, knew about the Black Dahlia. I even did episodes on this subject before then, but somebody asked me if I had read the book Black Dahlia Red Rose, and I confessed that I had not, and I did one episode where I was talking about the Black Dahlia on BBOR, and then in 2023, I even mentioned the book Black Dahlia Red Rose on Zodiac Monday, out of curiosity, exploring a type of Zodiac killer Black Dahlia connection. But I finally sat down and started reading. And to bring up a point of clarity, some people were asking in the comments section, is it a non-fiction book or is it written as a novel? And Pew Eatwell actually has a disclaimer on Black Dahlia Red Rose where she says that it is not a novel. It's written in a narrative form, and she specifically chose to write it in a narrative form on purpose, but she does not want the book to be perceived as a novel. So I look forward to going through this one. However, even in her introduction, there was a major error, and she stated that the reason why that this case is so famous is because the media decided to call Elizabeth Short the Black Dahlia, and the media is where she got the nickname. But as we already know, on Dahlia Thursday, Elizabeth Short did not receive the nickname the Black Dahlia from the media. It was one that she had while she was still alive, which she was given the name presumably by men who liked her physical appearance and also likened her hair to that of a dahlia flower. And one of the more unsubstantiated aspects of it is that she regularly wore black underwear. But I've already noticed that there are a lot of scandalous things that people are going to try and use to connect this story to things that aren't as scandalous as they should be. But anyway, moving on to the discussions on a new Black Dahlia suspect that I haven't mentioned before, Jack Anderson Wilson. And even if I haven't talked about him, I've definitely talked about an investigator in the Black Dahlia case named John Gilmore, who wrote a book called Severed, which has the claim of being the first book that was written in the nonfiction genre exclusively dedicated to the Black Dahlia. That's what the claim is. But, like from looking into other cases like the Zodiac Killer mystery, you often find that sometimes there's a little small booklet that was written years before. But anyway, that's the claim of the book Severed. And this is a very, very odd set of events that took place because I was just reading about Black Dahlia suspects. I'm a newcomer to the case. I have not followed the case since 2022 every single day, to be fair. This is a new series here on Black Box Online Radio. And when I was reading about Jack Anderson Wilson, one thing really, really surprised me. He starts out not as a suspect, but he starts out as an informant for John Gilmore. He starts out as someone who is telling the story of how the Black Dahlia was murdered, and I don't even think informant is the appropriate word. That's what everybody else is calling him. It sounds like he is presenting himself as an accomplice in the Black Dahlia murder, somebody who arranged certain things so that an individual who is only referred to as Mr. Jones or Jones was the actual culprit. But then, after the passing of Jack Anderson Wilson, he would go on to become a Black Dahlia suspect himself. So let's see what on earth is going on here. And one of the first sources that I would like to share with you guys is one from pleasekillme.com. I couldn't believe that was the name of the website, pleasekillme.com, but they did want to lay out the case for Jack Anderson Wilson as a Black Dahlia suspect. According to the book, Gilmore met an informant named Jack Anderson Wilson, who was then using the pseudonym Arnold Smith several times at Harold's 555 Club, a dark rundown bar established in 1944 in a raunchy part of downtown Los Angeles on Main Street. Gilmore plied the man with drinks and cash to get him to finally talk about what he knew about the murder, an old subject the two had danced around for years. Smith now wanted to tell the tale, and Smith, as we've already said, is Jack Anderson Wilson, but he's referred to by his alias in this article, Arnold Smith. The transcript of Smith's at times garbled and drunken descriptions of Short's imprisonment and torture inside a dingy, creaking old rooming house in South Los Angeles makes for some of the spookiest true crime testimonial ever. Okay, and here's a quotation. She gets sad and she gets in the back of the car and she heads south on La Brea. She wanted to know where he was going, and he headed down to Washington and then east as far as Flower. She was complaining about having to get back because of Henry's wife. There was a red bottle, a glass bottle, and it had a glass stopper for what you would use for fancy perfume. And he could have taken her eyes out with that, but you understand, that's what he said. Because his mind was gone. You know, like half those loose hoods had their mind eaten away because of syphilis. I know his mind was gone to do what was going to have done what he did to her. I remember being told something about pulling the car into the dirt driveway and back to the incinerator. This is the Chinaman's house in the 200 block on East 31st Street by San Pedro Street. This place smelled bad, and you get the idea, to go there, and it smells so bad like it's been closed up for a long time. And he has to tell her to be quiet again, but then she says that she has to make a call, and he says you can't. He put it back down, and she said something like, she is a prisoner, and he says, that's right, you're a prisoner. She didn't say anything, and he said okay, and he went and he grabbed her by the arm, and she started to pull back, but she hauled off and let him have it. With the purse, just swung it at him and caught him across the side of the face. He slugged her once, and her knees got weak. When he got outside, he heard the funniest sounds he'd heard. He could almost hear voices like they were talking. It was in his mind all the time, everything that was going to happen. He said he didn't have to think about anything because it was laid out in front of him. He got a small knife, or he got a knife on the back porch like a paring knife, and he went on the back porch, and a rope, and he had this clothesline hunk of rope, and this is what he said he had in mind for the waitress. Then he said that there was a larger knife, like a butcher's knife, that was 2 inches with the width of the blade near the handle, and he said he thought that that was such a knife that could be used to dismember her body. Alright, so, as you see, Jack Anderson Wilson is saying that he is not the killer. He's saying that this other person did it, who is simply identified as Jones. You have Smith and Jones, right? His alias is Smith, and this other guy's alias is Jones. Very common names in the English language. But he is providing an account as to what happened to Elizabeth Short, and I think that it's pretty clear about what he is discussing. He is saying that he was there, he knows where the house was. He's saying that this person, Jones, did not commit the murder in his own house. It belonged to someone of Chinese descent, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But it also seems like the motivation for this was he felt disrespected. And Jones, in the story, seems to have been upset with Elizabeth Short because she was rejecting his advances for sexual proclivities. So he launched this plan to murder her, but a big reason why the crime was committed the way that it was because of syphilis. Because syphilis is more or less a disease that rots the person's brain. A lot of people would think of it as an STI, but it destroys the human brain. That's why people talk about it so much in regards to high-profile individuals who went crazy in royal families in the past. Syphilis destroys the brain. And there's a variant of syphilis called neurosyphilis, which can create schizophrenia-like symptoms, and one of them is hearing voices. Now, I don't know who this person Jones is. However, that seems like what is being described by Jack Anderson Wilson. But then, Jack Anderson Wilson is going to just be taken in a different context, and he's going to be viewed as, oh wait, this guy's not talking about anybody that's actually named Jones, he's talking about himself. How else would he get this information? One thing that I really note about this transcript is that he seems to be extremely casual about everything, and it also seems like he isn't necessarily talking about doing things that you would expect somebody to do if they were an accomplice to this type of behavior. I mean, either that or he is just simply not present when these things are happening, and this has all been relayed to him by Jones. Because one thing that is not mentioned in these things is that he's saying that he's not participating in holding her down, he's not participating in hitting her. Everything that I just read indicates that Jones is the one who's doing all of this by himself. So it's almost like he's indicating that he's not there, he's not responsible, yet he still knows absolutely everything that happened, almost to the point where only he could have been there if this happened. Is that what this is all about? Is that what this is all about? The only way he learned these details is because he was the killer. He did this in a house, not in a warehouse, not in a medical facility, but this was done in a Southern California house where somebody hadn't been for a while. It had been closed up for a long time. They had completely uninterrupted. What do you think so far? Now, there is a website out there called immortalperfumes.com, and frequently on Black Box Online Radio, I say that I like learning about new websites so we can get different perspectives, but it really surprised me that I encountered immortalperfumes.com, and they had a page on the Black Dahlia case, and I was like, what on earth are they talking about? And at first I thought that this was going to be one of those websites where they do sell perfume, and they're going to try and exploit a high-profile true crime case to draw traffic into their website. Have you heard of Zodiac watches? And yes, I know the Zodiac watch came first, but the Zodiac watch company has definitely taken some liberties and indulgences in using the Zodiac killer to sell their brand. If you want some specific examples, I'll let you know in the comments section. But this website, Immortal Perfumes, was actually talking about the story, and this site is actually trying to identify the perfume bottles that could be described by Jack Anderson Wilson, and then it seems like they're actually trying to provide a service, and they provided 3 possible images of the alleged perfume bottle that could have been used in that story there. that have the glass stoppers. But their post was called 13 Days of Frightful Fragrances, day number 5, the red perfume bottle of the Black Dahlia. And it seems like for the month of October one year, they created a set of true crime stories that had some type of connection to perfume bottles. So it seems like there is some good in this where they are actually trying to share elements of a story that are relevant to their own expertise. So I'll give them credit for that. The Black Dahlia case, let's have a read. Elizabeth Short was known in death as the Black Dahlia. Well, as we said, also, she had that nickname before she died. She was an aspiring Hollywood actress, and she was found dead in a Los Angeles field in 1947, her corpse mutilated and posed. Elizabeth was 22 years old and moved to Los Angeles from her hometown in Massachusetts, set on pursuing Hollywood dreams. She was noted in her hometown for her striking beauty. She was statuesque with pale skin, blue eyes, dark hair, and a penchant for wearing all black. After a surgery for asthma, she was advised to move to a warmer climate, and she headed to California as a teen to be with her father, who, on a side note, the family thought had killed himself during the stock market crash, but he actually just abandoned them. They didn't get along, so she headed south to Santa Barbara, where she was arrested for underage drinking and sent home to Massachusetts. She returned to California and spent her last 6 months in Southern California. She was a loner and a wanderer, drifted along on friends' couches, and was known as a bit of a tease as she flirted with men to get them to pay for meals and drinks, but she wouldn't go home with them. All right. So already those of you who are very familiar with the Black Dahlia case, more so than I am, will have some objections to that paragraph. She was a loner, wanderer, flirted with men to get the drinks, she wouldn't go home with them. Firstly, this statement doesn't even make sense. She was a loner and she drifted on friends' couches. Well, she's might be wandering alone, logically, but if she has lots of friends, she's not purely a loner. I mean, that would be one thing. More importantly, one thing that I think is even mentioned on her FBI missing person wanted poster, really the wanted poster looking for the killer of Elizabeth Short, is that the description that was put out of Elizabeth Short is that she was somebody who was extremely friendly with both genders, both sexes, both men and women. She was extremely friendly and outgoing to everyone, even if she did not have close friends. I think that that is a more appropriate way of phrasing this. And yes, there was an FBI missing persons poster, and then ultimately, after she was murdered, it became a murder investigation. But let's continue. Elizabeth Short was last seen at the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles on January 9th of 1947 with a man named Robert Manley, who was later cleared as a suspect. And Robert Manley, of course, is Red Manley. I have a standalone episode about him as a suspect here, and he is the last person to have seen her alive. He was a traveling salesman who sold plumbing supplies, but he saw her on February 9th, and we have this enormous amount of time until her body is discovered. Did I say February? January 9th. He last saw her on January 9th, and we have this enormous amount of time until her body is discovered on January 15th. So, I mean, that doesn't necessarily implicate anything in regards to his guilt. Theories on what happened. To this date, her murder remains unsolved, though there have been hundreds of confessions, sensationalized news reports, and countless theories. In the first nonfiction book written about the case, Severed, by James Gilmore, there's a pretty shocking play-by-play of her death. And this says James Gilmore, but of course that would be referring to John Gilmore, and I think I can understand why they misstated his name, because it also says that James Gilmore himself was a Hollywood man, and he had James Dean as a friend in the 1950s. John Gilmore, James Dean. They're probably thinking of James Dean when they wrote this. But now we're finally getting to Jack Anderson Wilson as a suspect. When researching his book, he met a former criminal and sex offender named Jack Anderson Wilson at bars in Los Angeles in the 1980s. Wilson had long alluded to knowing something about the case. After buying the man a lot of drinks, Gilmore asked him what he knew of the Black Dahlia murder, and Wilson proceeded to give him the play-by-play. There was a red bottle, and it had a glass stopper that you use for fancy perfume, and that could have taken her eyes out, but you understand, that's what he said, because his mind was gone. Without anything further to go on, other than the bottle was red and it had a stopper, these are some of the examples of possible perfume bottles that he could have been describing. And I do want to address something very important here, and that is that this theory is going to be heavily criticized. I've been watching a lot of the Larry Harnish videos that are available on his YouTube channel, Larry Harnish, and he is horribly critical of John Gilmore and all of his attempts to talk to Jack Anderson Wilson. He pretty much calls John Gilmore a liar and a fraud, saying he blatantly published incorrect information in his book Severed. And the story of Jack Anderson Wilson that has been shared by Larry Harnish is that, firstly, nobody has credibility if they are paying the informant with money, drinks, and food. Is this a way to get reliable information out of someone? Or is it just some type of crackpot who is making this stuff up because he's getting money, drinks, and food? And Larry Harnish even brought up a quotation from John Gilmore where he told Jack Anderson Wilson, "Oh, I know you want smaller bills, but these are 20s. I hope that's okay." Something to that effect. And I completely understand where he's coming from, but I also have not heard this for the first time, that an informant has received some type of reward. I mean, Henry Lee Lucas, the confession killer, confessed to crimes in exchange for steak and milkshakes, right? So, yes, people do things like this. Now, is this a viable confession? Well, what Larry Harnish also said is that, originally, Jack Anderson Wilson starts out as an informant, blaming all of this stuff on somebody named Jones, who Jack Anderson Wilson was either with when the crime happened, or he knew of the information secondhand from Jones when he committed the Black Dahlia murder. But then Jack Anderson Wilson would go on to die in a fire, and after his death, John Gilmore would then have a reversal, and ultimately he would start blaming Jack Anderson Wilson for the entirety of everything. I I just want to address a particular elephant in the room issue. One thing that I'm noticing about Jack Anderson Wilson as a Black Dahlia murder suspect, not the informant, not the accomplice, but as a murder suspect, is I'm not seeing any medical knowledge that is in his background. I'm not seeing anything that would show that he would be the type of person to commit criminally sophisticated murders. He seems like a thug. He seems like, as we've heard, a sex offender. He seems like a liar, a fraud, a grifter. But where are the indicators that he would commit a murder of this caliber, where a woman is cut in half and the blood is drained out of her body, and that she is scrubbed until her skin is completely clean to destroy all the evidence, and that of course she has the Glasgow grin, and that she has multiple incisions to her body and mutilations? Where is the evidence that Jack Anderson Wilson was the type of person to do this? Now, if anything, if you look at his story and this person Jones that he is talking about, it almost seems to make a little bit more sense that it would be somebody who was rejected by her and was hearing voices and had neurosyphilis, and that's why he committed a horribly deranged murder. I mean, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below. And right now I'm going to visit a different source, and that would be Crime Library. And can I just say, I absolutely love Crime Library for all of their extended publications that they have put out. A lot of people have book-length discussions on certain true crime cases, and they just put it all out there for free. And there is an ebook, if we can call it that, called The Black Dahlia Profile by Greg McCrary. And I'm going to look at a couple sections here because he has a chapter that he simply calls Gilmore's Suspect, which will be talking all about Jack Anderson Wilson. That's chapter 7. And then chapter 8 is called Is This Suspect Viable? I think that that's absolutely great. So let's have a read here one more time. These are the words of Greg McCrary, and if anybody wants to read the full thing, The Black Dahlia Profiled, available on Crime Library. While a number of suspects have been proposed for the Black Dahlia murder, including the children of two now dead men proposing their fathers as the most likely candidate, John Gilmore offers one of the more tantalizing possibilities. Officer John St. John took charge of the case in the 1960s, and Gilmore approached him with a tape recording which he said was given to him by a thin man, about 6 feet 4 inches tall, who walked with a limp and had a rap sheet for robbery and sexual offenses. The man went by the name Arnold Smith, but he was actually Jack Anderson Wilson, and he claimed that he had met a character named Al Morrison who had confessed to the murder of Elizabeth Short. In fact, they had been together on the night it had occurred. Smith showed Gilmore a box of Short's belongings, including a handkerchief and a photo of her with Mr. Smith, and a photo of her with Smith and the blonde woman, Anne Morrison. Smith said that he had taken Short to a room in a Hollywood hotel along with Morrison. Short had been surprised that Morrison was planning to stay in the room too, and refused the booze that he offered. She was uninterested in a fling with him, so Morrison took her to the house on East 31st Street where they had a physical altercation. Morrison knocked her out and got a paring knife and a large butcher knife and some clothesline, and when Short tried to escape, he stuffed her underpants in her mouth and tied her up. He proceeded to stab her multiple times until she expired, then he cut her in half in the bathtub and drained the body of blood. He washed everything clean and then took her out to the vacant lot. Okay, so, again, this is the story of Jack Anderson Wilson supplying this information as an informant and an accomplice. As you heard very clearly, it even states here that he was with this person, Jones Morrison, on the night of the murder. So, informant and accomplice. Now, did he actually do the crime himself? Highly improbable, but let's get to the next chapter. Is this suspect viable? Mr. Smith was considered to be a viable suspect in this murder, and Mr. Smith is Jack Anderson Wilson. Remember, Morrison is Jones. I'm just going to refer to them as Jones and Jack Anderson Wilson. Jack Anderson Wilson has to be considered a viable suspect in this murder and perhaps the murder of Mrs. Bauerdorf as well. Physically, he matches the description of the man Georgette was dating who frightened her. It is unclear what Mr. Smith's relationship was with the alleged killer, who we know as Jones or Mr. Morrison, but it is unlikely that a lone sexual sadistic killer would confess to anyone, especially in great detail. Now, this is another thing that really surprised me about this, that you just have this horribly brutal, horrific murder that's going on, and somebody is just going to either confess, or they're just going to let their accomplice walk around, that they're just going to let everything just go back to normal, that this person is going to murder Elizabeth Short in such a horribly gruesome way, and then they're just going to be like, oh yeah, somebody knows about it, but whatever, I'm concerned about other things now. It's surprising. You could interpret the evidence either way. Either this person has points of leverage on Jack Anderson Wilson, so he knows that Jack Anderson Wilson will not confess, or he is genuinely disturbed and deranged and doesn't know what's going on. And I don't really know if it's either one of these, to be honest. You could interpret the evidence in either direction, but one thing that I genuinely do think, and I think is more probable, is that the killer is a lone wolf. I think that that's what Greg McCrary is alluding to in this book here, The Black Dahlia Profiled, when he is stating that it seems like it would make more sense that the Black Dahlia Avenger was a lone wolf offender who committed this crime purely on his own terms, under his own guise, and there would be no need for an accomplice, there would be no need to make any type of detailed confession, there would be no need to create those types of vulnerabilities. Based on the methodical nature of how Elizabeth Short was murdered and bisected, cut apart, and her body was absolutely eviscerated, based on the awareness that this person had in terms of draining her blood, scrubbing her skin, this person had awareness of their mental faculties, and if they had this type of awareness, they were also very concerned about having things traced back to them. And that doesn't sound anything like somebody who's going to give a detailed confession, or any type of high-profile criminal who's going to let the accomplice just walk around and start, talking to reporters and investigators and anybody who's just genuinely curious about the story. This person would be very uncomfortable about somebody talking to John Gilmore. So in terms of the theories, what do you think? I mean, let me just ask you that as a challenge question, because I do a lot of challenge questions here on Black Box Online Radio. Do you think the Black Dahlia Avenger was a lone wolf, or do you think he had accomplices? I am really leaning toward a lone wolf based on how methodical, neurotic, and just overall worrisome that he was, and I don't think that he would have wanted this information in the hands of somebody else. And the point that I'm trying to avoid saying is, I think that if Jack Anderson Wilson had all of this knowledge, the Black Dahlia Avenger might have murdered him to keep him silent, so he wouldn't do things like talk to John Gilmore for the book Severed. But let's keep going here. So the exception might be if there was an extraordinarily close relationship between two co-conspirators in other violent crimes. The other possibility is as if they were one and the same and the police both suspected that they were. Okay, so that means that there is no Jones, there is no Morrison. This is all Jack Anderson Wilson. I'll give them that. If you want to make the case that he obtained this information because he was actually there and he was the sole killer, sure, but I just don't think he's the right type of offender. I definitely think that he was someone who could have overpowered Elizabeth Short. I definitely think that he was someone who could have been stronger, who could have actually held her down in an intimidating way, because in the transcript that I was reading to you, it doesn't sound like she's fighting for her life immediately. It sounds like he is hitting her, this person, whoever he is hitting her, and she is just kind of like accepting it and just realizing, I don't have the ability to fight back. And some large man like Jack Anderson Wilson, he might fit into that particular category. But an obvious consideration is whether or not Mr. Smith actually provided exclusive knowledge, i.e. knowledge that was not available from any other news source in the media. If everything that was relayed was available from public sources, then his significance is questionable. Well, I mean, if he was able to obtain things from the media, then that would throw a lot of this stuff out of the window. Because one of the points that I do need to reinforce, and this isn't exclusive to Jack Anderson Wilson, it is that people lie about stuff. People make things up, especially if they think that there's going to be some type of reward in it for them. People will lie to the moon and back. And also, people will tell lies even if there is no reward. They just like hearing themselves talk, and it also fuels their own excitement. So, what do you think, though? Do you think there was an accomplice, or do you think the Black Dahlia was a lone wolf? Do you think that somebody like Jack Anderson Wilson would have had the medical capabilities to commit the Black Dahlia murder? Everything that we've read so far would suggest that this seems like he did not. So one of the real other elephant in the room issues is that it seems like Jack Anderson Wilson would have been the type of person who would have perhaps done something more physically brutish to Elizabeth Short as opposed to methodical, but it also seems like maybe he's just making this up. Maybe there never was a Jones, there never was a Morrison, and his name wasn't even really Smith. That's another thing that was untrue. So, I mean, my ultimate response is, I think that he is lying. I think that he told wild stories. I absolutely think that somebody like John Gilmore would have found it very valuable for writing a book. But I do want to come back to one thing from our previous discussions here on Dahlia Thursday, and that is that who was the Black Dahlia? Because we actually explore these mysteries because we want answers. I want to know. And, you know, this isn't just about wheel spinning. I think every single person who has listened this far into the recording wants to know who the Black Dahlia Avenger was. And I lean more and more toward Walter Bailey as a suspect. However, Walter Bailey was 66 years old, somebody who was a medical doctor, who was who taught surgery at the University of Southern California, worked for the LA County Medical Center, somebody who lived and had the house in the vicinity of the dump site, not like right next to the dump site, but he just has so many boxes that can be checked. The problem is, though, his age. I said this once and I'll say it again. If Walter Bailey was 35 years old, I might be saying, you know what, this is probably the guy. But 66 years old, and he died 1 year after the Black Dahlia was murdered. So he wasn't in the best of health. I think he is an interesting suspect. I'm absolutely willing to hear more, but I'm not convinced completely. But somebody like Jack Anderson Wilson, he falls to the bottom of the barrel for me. All I'm hearing is a bunch of wild stories that might be made up, and who knows where the truth is. And if who knows where the truth is, we can't say that he was the guy. What do you think about anything that has been discussed in this episode? Let me know what you think about any of the material that has been covered. Do you have any comments about the book, Black Dahlia Red Rose, that I have just started? And also, Do you have any comments about Betty Bersinger finding the body of Elizabeth Short? And please feel free to tune in on Saturday for the bonus episode about the disappearance of Maura Murray. Okay, that's going to be all for me now, but I will let you know that in addition to the regularly scheduled lineup, we also release shorts and reels here on Black Box Online Radio Monday through Friday, and they are available on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. On Instagram, my name is blackboxonlineradio, and my name is Ned DeHaan on Facebook. And if you want to support all of these efforts, you can go over to buymeacoffee.com, buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88, and that allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. I will see you tomorrow for an episode about D.B. Cooper. Until next time.